And what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Historic Hot Laps. I'm your host, Alex Daniels. Got a lot of stuff to cover today. We're just going to dive right into it with the recap of the Atlanta weekend over there, NASCAR, and all three of the series they've got going on over there. So let's dive right into it, right? We've got two short race weekends under our belt now. EchoPark Speedway served up the classic NASCAR tripleheader with fireworks across all three series. You had trucks, the O'Reilly Series, and Cup Series, and some results that are shaking up how we see this season unfolding. So let's dive into it. Starting with the Truck Series. Kicked things off Saturday with the FR8 Racing 208, and Kyle Busch was at it again, right? Busch battled wheel-to-wheel, exchanging leads with Stuart Friesen before ultimately taking the checkered flag. The race was shortened under time limit rules because of earlier weather delays. We knew this weekend was going to be a little weird. It was a little cold, rainy, rough for everybody involved, but Busch still held off Carson Hocevar by a razor-thin margin, drove his Spire Motorsports Chevrolet to its 9th career win at EchoPark and 68th of the Truck Series in his career, which is crazy. His third straight win at this track in the Truck Series, and Carson Hocevar played teammate very, very well in this one, right? What makes this win interesting, though, isn't just the number of the win column. It's how Busch played the draft all day long, leaned on his teammate, which was Hocevar there for pushes late. Classic high-speed Atlanta / EchoPark strategy, whatever you want to call it. And the Truck Series is headed straight over to its first ever street race next weekend at St. Pete. This could really flip things around on who's a contender. We're still pretty early in the season, but it's good to see some of this stuff building up, right? Now, Saturday night, we had the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, and that one belonged to Sheldon Creed. We got to give him all the credit that's due after 138 career starts and 15 runner-up finishes. Creed finally broke through and stood on victory lane at EchoPark Speedway, scoring his first career win in the O'Reilly Series. He executed a last lap pass on Austin Hill in turn 3 to take the lead and hold it on. This was a long time coming for Creed. He's been fast before, but he's been just a hair too short too many times. EchoPark's relatively high speeds and tricky aero balance make close battles unavoidable, and Creed put it all together at the right moment. That breakthrough could be exactly the confidence boost he needs heading deeper into this season. He's definitely got a good team behind him. It's awesome to see what they've been able to accomplish. And yeah, just all around exciting, right? This leads us over to the Cup Series. Jumping into this, we rolled around into the Auto Trader 400. What a finish. Tyler Reddick goes back-to-back to start the season. Double overtime drama, winning both the Daytona 500 and now at EchoPark. He had the double overtime shootout, had everybody on the edge of their seats. He led more laps than anyone else, 53 of the scheduled 271 laps, and held on in a freight train finish that saw Chase Briscoe nose out the field there for just a second. Honestly, either of the 2311 cars could have had this. We saw Bubba Wallace make a crucial mistake going to the top line. We're not going to try to backseat drive it, Monday morning quarterback, whatever you want to call it. He made a decision which looked like it was going to work 99% of the time at that race throughout the day, but that time it didn't have the run. But EchoPark delivered in a big way. You had 57 lead changes, 14 different leaders, and cars jostling for position until the end. Reddick's Toyota limped across the finish line, missing the right front fender after being caught up in a late wreck. Yet somehow he kept it all together, proving once again that grit and timing sometimes beats out pure handling. And honestly, he still had a full front bumper, so that helped a lot, right? Behind him, you had a strong mix of veterans and rising stars that filled the top 10. You had Chastain back there, Hocevar, Suarez. He ran a hell of a good race, so congrats to him and that Spire team there, scoring top 5 finishes across all that. And remember, Cup qualifying was canceled because of rain, so the field did take green based on points and practice speeds, which may have contributed to a scrappy early position battles in that. Reddick obviously having the most points, taking the pole to begin with, but I mean, he worked his way back and forth a few times. It was pretty wild, and then to see what Hocevar was able to pull off after being 2 laps down at one point was just wild to see. So definitely leading up to a lot of good stuff this season. Can't wait to see what else it brings. Let's talk about this for just a second. You've got 2 race weekends into the season. I don't know about you, but something feels a little different this season. It's not, any kind of aero package. It's not tire wear. It's not really even who's winning. There's a different energy going into NASCAR this year. We're back to the chase-style season-long points format. No more win and you're in. No more artificial cutoff drama hanging over every restart in February. No more drivers pointing at the playoff line before the calendar even flips to April. And honestly, to me, this racing feels a lot healthier. The weight of the racing is back. Under the old format, a driver could win early and essentially race with house money for months, right? We saw it. Daytona winner could ride around mid-pack for half the regular season, knowing they're locked in. We saw it with Jesse Love last year in the Xfinity Series. I mean, and he ends up winning in the Final Four. I mean, he had to earn his way there, but it's just a different momentum, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. So every single position matters again. A driver fights for 8th instead of settling for 12th. It actually means something long-term. Stage points aren't just a padding. They're actually the foundation for a lot of guys. I mean, look at Bubba Wallace. He's number 2 in points just purely based on his finishing results and getting those extra stage points. A bad pit stop isn't just a bad day. It's a dent in a championship campaign that doesn't reset in 10 weeks. You can feel urgency in the series already. There's no safety net anymore. The driving looks a lot more calculated. If you go back and look at this last weekend on late restarts, you could see the aggression, but it wasn't a reckless aggression or desperation. It was the, I have to win this season or it doesn't matter. I need the points. It felt like a more measured, calculated attack for most drivers. Drivers are thinking long-term again, protecting their right rear, take the P4 instead of wrecking for P, salvage a day when the car isn't perfect. They're really looking at full season championship racing, and that's what's been missing, right? Consistency is back in style now. For years, we've rewarded chaos, right? Like, dump a guy, get the race win, you're into the playoffs. Steal one race in advance, reset the points, survive the next round, repeat. Now, the way we're set up now, if someone strings together 6 top 5 finishes in a row, that's a powerful move, and that's momentum. A driver who runs 4th, 5th, 3rd, 6th, across 4 race weekends, suddenly more dangerous than the guy who wins once and then finishes 30th for the next 4 weekends, right? That's a different kind of tension. It's building. The standings actually matter again. 2 weeks in, people are already checking the points. They're not looking to see a playoff grid, the actual standings. Who's gained 40 points over 2 races like a Bubba Wallace, or who's got a 40-point lead like Tyler Reddick currently has right now going into COTA. Who left stage points on the table? Who's playing catch-up? I mean, there's something satisfying about watching a championship develop organically instead of being manufactured for television. And I may get a little flack for that, but it rewards discipline. And we're rewarding depth in the field now. We're rewarding teams that can unload well at Phoenix, survive Atlanta, still be sharp when they get to Bristol. It feels like a season again, not a tournament. It's not a Final Four, March Madness type situation all year long. It's not any less dramatic. It's just a different thing. It's a different energy. The drama doesn't necessarily disappear just because the format changes. It evolves. It changes. Instead of the, will this lock them in? Can they maintain this run for 36 races? It's a change of thinking, right? So instead of cutoff lines in August, there's already pressure from February moving forward because, yes, your chase format resets a little bit, but you've got to be there for it, and you've got to be consistent. And I think that's why this energy feels so much different. Drivers aren't racing for moments. They're doing campaigns again. 2 weekends in, you can already see who's building something and who's scrambling. We talked about 23XI and how strong they've been. Teams that look balanced across different track types feel dangerous. The ones that are at least feast or famine, they feel like they're under pressure already. And the pressure is real. It's earned. If you have a bad month, there's no reset coming. You have to claw your way back the hard way. This changes our mindset. This changes our strategy. This changes how crew chiefs call races in March. I didn't realize how much the winning you're in era had conditioned us to look for shortcuts. And now that that's gone, this sport feels much steadier to me, more mature, more honest. The best driver across the entire season has a real path to winning the championship again. Not just the hottest driver in 3-race stretch in November, but 2 weeks in, you can feel the shift. The racing has gotten calmer, but more strategic. It's become more meaningful. And if the first couple weekends are any indication of the kind of season we might have that rewards a driver who treats every single lap like it counts, it's really going to show us something awesome. And kudos to NASCAR for making this change. Just my little opinion ran on here. Probably went a little longer than I needed to, but that's where I'm at with it. And thank you, NASCAR. Now, let's jump over to some IndyCar stuff. We've seen IndyCar testing at St. Pete and Phoenix. The 2026 season is starting to show its shape. We've got our first race weekend coming up. St. Pete told us who's comfortable on tight technical street circuits, right? Phoenix told us who's ready to fight in the shorter ovals. So here's the big takeaways. Let's talk about it. Let's do some predictions. Let's break it down. much like we did a couple weeks ago for the NASCAR teams. But here's where our opinions are on the teams going into the 2026 IndyCar season. Normal heavyweight fight, right? Team Penske versus Chip Ganassi Racing. If testing is any indication, this is a backbone for a championship fight. Penske looked methodical at St. Pete, stable over the bumps, clean on the exits. At Phoenix, they look comfortable in traffic, not too edgy, not skating the rear tires. Ganassi, though, might have the best long-run balance of anyone. I mean, we're going to see repeat performances from last year, right? At St. Pete, their cars rotated naturally mid-corner. At Phoenix, tire wear looked very controlled. This matchup looks like Penske may have a qualifying edge. Ganassi may have the race day edge. Penske feels sharp early on. Ganassi feels like a long-term team. If you're picking a title fight, it's probably between these two organizations again. But this year, the margin feels very thin. This puts us into wildcard contenders, right? It's their time. Arrow McLaren versus the establishment. McLaren might have shown some raw speed across both tests. At St. Pete, their cars looked very aggressive on entry. Almost too daring in the corners, some would say. At Phoenix, they weren't very timid. They're pushing high lines, testing limits. But here's the thing. Speed hasn't been their issue in recent season. It's all been about execution. So you're going to be looking at McLaren versus Penske in qualifying trim, McLaren versus Ganassi in long-run tire management, McLaren versus themselves in pit strategies and pit lane. If they clean up their small errors, they absolutely are in the title fight. If not, they're race winners who leave points on the table. We know they were the best chance last year, but they did have their inconsistencies and they did stumble a little bit here and there, right? I think everybody can see that. So let's talk about some inconsistency questions. Andretti, TWG, whatever we're supposed to call it now, versus their stability, right? They looked quick in both tests, but not uniformly quick. One car would light up the timing sheets and it looked like it was chasing balance. At Phoenix, they didn't look super comfortable, but they didn't look dominant either. Their week-to-week consistency is going to be the problem. Can they string together the results? Can they avoid a bad weekend that wrecks the momentum for them? They're going to win races this year. They have willpower now. Plus, I mean, they ran a couple street courses last year with Kyle Kirkwood. Will they finally eliminate the dips in their season and keep the momentum from them race wins? That's what really matters for them, right? So let's go a little bit further back in here. Let's talk about some precision stuff. Meyer-Shank versus RLL. This feels like a midfield duel worth watching. Meyer-Shank looked tidy at St. Pete, clean, organized, no wasted movement. At Phoenix, they weren't super flashy, but they looked stable. RLL showed flashes of speed in both venues, but it didn't look like they were quite settled. You could see drivers adjusting mid-corner, chasing some balance. MSR does have that Ganassi tie. They may have that execution edge. RLL may have slightly higher upside if they hit their setup window. Both need qualifying to avoid the chaos in the midfield, so don't be shocked if one of these teams steals a podium fairly early on. This moves us to another matchup, Ed Carpenter Racing versus Juncos versus Dale Coyne, right? So Phoenix testing mattered a lot for these groups. ECR looked much more comfortable on the oval than St. Pete. That's not surprising. When the series hits ovals, they move up the order, right? Juncos looked aggressive at both tests. They're pushing. They want to disrupt the midfield hierarchy. It's going to be a little different now with the driver lineup changes. Coyne experimented heavily, as you can expect with that team. They had different lines, different setups. They're not going to show everything they have at testing. They probably don't know everything they have yet, to be honest. So the matchup for this one, you've got ECR versus the field on ovals, being the fastest in the Phoenix test. You've got some good stuff coming from them on ovals. Juncos, consistency matters, right? They usually can find a good setup. They can usually run top 10, but can they keep it? Can they keep consistency? And then the biggest thing for Coyne is the opportunity. These teams are not going to headline the championship, but they're absolutely going to shape the race themselves. And, you know, we may backtrack in 6 or 7 races and say, okay, ECR is going to be a championship contender. I mean, they've got an Indy 500 champion in their stable. They've got a young rookie who's good. They've got a team owner who's hungry. If anything, I see Rossi moving up the points sheets this year. Rasmussen might get a surprise win. I think that's where we're at, but we'll see. So what does 2026 look like for us? After 2 different test environments, here's the early picture, right? Penske and Ganassi look complete. McLaren might be the fastest. Andretti's dangerous but unpredictable. The midfield's pretty compressed. The oval program strength varies throughout all of them. more than we probably expected. And maybe the most important takeaway for us is no one's really bulletproof. And that's good for the fans, that's good for the series, that's good for the chaos. That's great heading into St. Pete because now we're just watching the season start. We're going to watch these matchups begin. So here's my honest takeaway after watching both St. Pete and Phoenix testing. It doesn't feel like a season where one organization controls the narrative anymore. It feels like a season where the championship is going to be taken, not given. Penske looks more prepared than they have been. That's what they do. They show up with a baseline that works almost everywhere, and then they look like, they don't look untouchable, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But they do look consistent, better than years past. They've been in a bit of a rut. Chip Ganassi looks smart, calculated. They're already thinking about race 12 instead of race 1. They win championships. We know that's the mentality that wins championships. We'll see how that plays out for them. Arrow McLaren might have the most speed in the paddock, but speed alone hasn't won the series in years. It's the execution that does. Andretti Global is still the biggest question mark, though. The upside is real. The dips are real, too, and what Phoenix showed us, so oval gap isn't massive. Nobody looks miles ahead. Even traditionally strong oval programs have company. That's the theme of 2026 so far, right? Compression. The field is compressed. The margins are compressed. The advantage window is compressed. If I had to sum it up in one sentence, 2026 feels like a season where the campaign might win 3 or 4 races, but they'll be in the top 6 almost every week, right? That's what St. Pete's going to tell us right away. Who's calm, who's patient, who's already thinking long-term, because the field is tight. The team that blinks first is going to spend the rest of the year chasing. I don't think anyone in the paddock can afford that. All right, let's kick this one off with some news. Man, we cannot get away from the drama in NASCAR. More courtroom drama rather than talking about the garages in Daytona. Joe Gibbs Racing's filed a federal lawsuit against former competition director Chris Gabehart. JGR alleges Gabehart embarked on what the team calls, in quotes, a brazen scheme to steal its most sensitive information, allegedly to benefit rival team Spire Motorsports. The suit, filed in a Western District Court of North Carolina, claims Gabehart violated his contract and misused confidential team materials, and that these actions caused the organization more than $8 million in damages. I don't even know how you put a price tag on that stuff, right? But here's how they say it all went down from the JGR side. Gabehart, a longtime JGR engineer and former crew chief turned competition director, apparently asked for carte blanche control over racing decisions in November of last year and was denied. Soon after, according to the lawsuit, JGR began negotiating a separation, thinking it would be business as usual, only to uncover something very different during a forensic review of Gabehart's company laptop. JGR says that the review turned up Google searches about Spire, folders labeled Spire and past setups, and more than a dozen photos of internal JGR files taken on November 7th, 2025, all allegedly containing proprietary info like race analytics, setup documents, payroll details, and sponsor revenue figures. JGR also claims Gabehart told the team he hadn't spoken to other employees about the future job offers, but the suit says he was negotiating with Spire behind the scenes and even attempting to recruit other JGR employees to jump ship. And here's the kicker. JGR says it found out on February 11th, weeks after Gabehart left, that he has plans to become Chief Motorsports Officer at Spire, job that would have put him in charge of all racing strategy and operations. As of right now, Spire has not officially confirmed hiring Gabehart, and his attorney has declined to comment publicly. Gabehart has 21 days to respond to the lawsuit. So, where would this go, right? The case could unfold in a few different directions. You've got the financial damages. JGR seeking at least $8 million plus attorney fees, possibly more if judge orders doubled or trebled damages. Injunctive relief. The team is also seeking court order that Gabehart be barred from using or sharing any of JGR's proprietary data. You have the precedent that if this goes to trial, it could set a benchmark on how seriously teams protect their technical performance data over there in NASCAR. And yes, after we just watched a months-long legal battle between NASCAR and 2311 Racing, shout out to attorneys getting more airtime than drivers last December, it also feels like lawsuits are now the off-season tradition. If we needed one thing to prove motorsports isn't just about horsepower, it's that trade secrets, NDAs, and federal courts are now part of the racing landscape too. Maybe next year we'll have a points battle and a class action dispute over pit stop towels or who knows what else, right? It's pretty wild out there. Big news out of the development side of things. 13-year-old Keelan Harvick, son of retired Cup champion Kevin Harvick, has signed a long-term driver development agreement with Toyota Racing Development. The deal announced Monday by TRD USA brings Harvick into the heart of Toyota's development pipeline as part of an effort to support his growth through structured pavement racing opportunities. Under the agreement, Keelan will compete in dozens of late model races in the 2026 season, piloting the number 62 Toyota Camry for, Rackley WAR and Kevin Harvick Inc., with ExxonMobil serving as a primary sponsor for several of these events. Already a headline maker in his own right for someone so young, Harvick has built an impressive resume in the grassroots racing scene. In December 2025, he became the youngest ever winner of the Snowflake 125 at Five Flags Speedway, and earlier this month he scored his first career late model victory at Florence Motor Speedway's Icebreaker event, again the youngest winner of that event. His results don't stop there. Keelan won the 2024 NX Young Lions National Championship and made a successful transition from Legends cars to late models, winning 4 ZMAX Cars Tour Pro Late Model races and 2 Cars Tour West Pro Late Model races in 2025, becoming the first driver to win Pro Late Model events in both series in the same season. It's really cool to join the Toyota family with the Cup Series and the O'Reilly Series drivers, the whole family, Keelan said in a statement. I'm excited to learn from them. TRD President Tyler Gibbs also weighed in. Keelan has proven himself on track and despite his young age, has continued to be wise beyond his years and professionalism and work ethic. We see a bright future ahead for him, and everyone at Toyota is so proud to be part of his journey. So for some context on this, Toyota's development pipeline has previously supported drivers who have gone on to success in NASCAR's higher levels, including Christopher Bell, Corey Heim, John Hunter Nemechek. They were all products of the Toyota Driver Development Program. Kevin Harvick, obviously Keelan's dad, who raced 23 seasons in NASCAR with Chevrolet and Ford, explained why this partnership made sense for his family. He says, we've concentrated a lot on development and the theory on how it should go, and I feel like Toyota process matched what we would do. The effort that Toyota puts in is not only the driving piece of it, but the human piece is very important to us as a family. While Keelan won't be eligible for national NASCAR competition until he's older, the move signifies a major step in his path towards professional racing. In a sport always watching the next generation, the signing has become one of the biggest development stories of the year, a moment that could shape the future of NASCAR and put Harvick on one of the biggest racing stages in the world, right? So pretty cool news. He's obviously got a little bit of time. You got to be, 16 years old before you can try to jump into a truck or anything like that. I'm sure they'll, I don't know if they'll tie over to ARCA at all. I shouldn't even brought that up because I don't even know for sure. But regardless, super awesome. Congrats, Keelan, on that. Favorite time of the episode, the history portion. This week we're going to talk about Ralph Mulford. When people talk about early American racing heroes, you usually hear names like Barney Oldfield, Ray Haroon. You almost never hear about Ralph Mulford, and that's strange because for a stretch in the 1910s, Mulford wasn't just competitive, he was one of the best drivers in the country, and depending on how you look at history, he may have been the true winner of the 1911 Indianapolis 500. So, let's rewind it before we get crazy here. Ralph Mulford was born in 1880 in New Jersey. Like many early drivers, he didn't start in a formal development ladder. There wasn't one back then. He started with mechanical curiosity and nerve. By the early 1900s, Mulford was racing in the Wild West of America's racing motorsport. He had the board tracks, the dirt ovals, open road endurance runs, cars that barely had brakes, speeds that were considered reckless of the era. He quickly built a reputation for being smooth, calculated, and technically aware. He wasn't just brave, though. He understood the machinery. That mattered in an era where finishing a race was sometimes more impressive than winning it. The 1911 Indianapolis 500 is where things get interesting, right? So the inaugural Indianapolis 500 was run the brand new Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The race was won officially by Ray Haroon, but Mulford, driving a Lozère, finished second, or so the record books say. The controversy centers on scoring and lap counting. Some historians and contemporary accounts argued that Mulford may have actually completed more laps than Haroon. The official results credited Haroon to the 200-lap win, but there were disputes about whether Mulford had run the full distance plus additional laps during the confusion of the early timing methods. In the days before electronic scoring, it was manual tallies and mistakes always happened. Mulford himself maintained that he believed he had won. Some early reports supported that theory. Ultimately, the official result stood. Haroon went down in history as the first Indy 500 champion. Mulford went down as the guy who might have been. That moment alone wouldn't have defined many careers, but Mulford's story didn't end there. In 1911, the same year as the first 500, Mulford won the AAA National Championship. He was a national championship driver of the United States. He didn't just show up at Indy, he dominated the broader championship schedule. He collected victories across dirt tracks, road courses, and at the time when the AAA National Championship was a top tier of American motorsport. This was pre-NASCAR, pre-IndyCar as we know it. This was it. This was the major league of motorsport. Over his career, Mulford accumulated dozens of wins over major sanctioned events. Exact records from the era are inconsistent because record keeping was a little rough, but historians credit him for at least 15 AAA championship race victories and numerous additional wins in non-championship events. From roughly 1910 to 1914, he was a consistent title contender, and he did it without the glamour that attached to some of his contemporaries. Mulford remained competitive through the 1910s, including the 1916 season, when he again showed the strength of the AAA championship ranks. What makes this impressive is the context. Cars were evolving quickly, speeds were climbing, board tracks were becoming faster and far more dangerous. Fatalities were common in that era. Mulford raced in what was arguably the most hazardous period of American racing history, and he survived it. That alone says something. Accounts from the era describe Mulford as a disciplined, technical-minded racer. He wasn't a showman that Barney Oldfield was. He wasn't a larger-than-life personality. Instead, he was known for consistency. He managed tires carefully. He preserved his equipment. He didn't overdrive unless necessary. In endurance races, that style paid off. In sprint formats, it sometimes meant he didn't grab the headlines. But over a season, it made him very dangerous. So why isn't he remembered more? Well, here's the honest answer. Timing and narrative, right? He raced before radio broadcasts and made drivers household names. He raced before the Indy 500 became the singular defining event of a career. And he lost officially the most famous race in American history by a margin that still sparks debate. If Mulford had been officially declared the 1911 Indy 500 winner, we might talk about him very differently. Instead, he became a footnote in the Haroon history, and that's somewhat unfair because beyond the 500, he was a national champion, a multi-time race winner, and one of the most consistent drivers of the era. Let's talk about his career stats real quick. You had the 1911 National Championship, estimated 15-plus AAA championship race wins, officially second-place finish in the Indy 500, even though that's the debate, right? Active between 1908 and 1917, and this is with stats that aren't as clean as modern box scores, but by any reasonable measure, Mulford was a lead in his era, right? Ralph Mulford represents something that's important to racing history. He represents the drivers who built the sport before it had safety nets, massive sponsorship, and national media coverage. He represents an era with bravery, mechanical understanding were equally important. He represents how thin the line can be between legend and obscurity. One scoring decision in 1911 changed the way history remembered him. But when you zoom out and look at the full body of work, Ralph Mulford wasn't just almost great. He was one of the best drivers of the 1910s. And if you're a fan of racing history, that's a name worth remembering, right? So let's have a little fun to close this one out, because if you're doing racing history right, you always ask the dangerous questions of what if, right? What if Ralph Mulford had officially been declared the winner of the 1911 Indianapolis 500? What changes? At first glance, maybe not much. One name swapped in a record book, but in motorsports, narrative shapes everything. Right now, the first Indianapolis 500 winner is Ray Haroon. That name is permanently tied to the origin of the Speedway. He's remembered driving the Marmon Wasp. He's credited with popularizing the rearview mirror during the race. He's part of this mythology of racing. But if Mulford wins, suddenly the first Indy 500 champion isn't the quiet engineer and revolutionary yellow car. It's a gritty national champion who fought through the chaos with timing disputes. Mulford becomes a founding hero of the Speedway. His 1911 AAA championship and Indy 500 win could be paired together. That's a monster combination in the early days of American racing. It definitely cements him as an undisputed king of that era. Instead of being remembered as the guy who might have won, he becomes the benchmark. Mulford already won the championship in 1911. If you add that 500 to the resume, now you're talking about first Indy 500 winner, national champion, multi-championship race victories. That's not a footnote career, that's Hall of Fame centerpiece material. Feels more like a factory backing, more press coverage, more opportunities in the years that followed. Early racing was heavily influenced by prestige. Winning the first 500 would have elevated Mulford into that top-tier category of celebrity drivers. Instead, Haroon becomes the historical anchor, right? Mulford became a trivia question. Now flip the coin. If Haroon doesn't win the 500, does his legacy shift? Almost certainly, right? The Marmon Wasp is still innovative. The rearview mirror story probably still exists. But without the win, Haroon isn't immortalized the same way. We talk about him as a clever engineer driver who had a strong run instead of the first Indy 500 champion. History can be brutal, simple, just like that. The Speedway's early narrative, first winner of any major sporting event, it can become fundamental of the sport. If Mulford wins, his identity at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is tied to a hard-charging AAA championship. I mean, instead, we just have these record books that say what if, right? The mythology of the event might lean more towards endurance grit rather than technical innovation, and subtly changes how we tell the story of America's racing birth. How does it change the sport? So on and so forth. The 500 still grows. The Speedway still becomes the centerpiece of American motorsport, but everything else fades. The hierarchy of the legends, all of it, right? But the what if isn't just about one trophy. It's about the thin margin between icon and obscurity. Mulford didn't fade because he wasn't talented. He didn't fade because he lacked results. He faded because history rewards the headline moment. In 1911, officially the headline went to someone else. If the scoring had gone differently, we might be closing the segment by saying Ralph Mulford, the king of Indianapolis. Instead, we say Ralph Mulford, the man who might have been. And maybe that's what makes the story so compelling more than a century later, because in racing, as in life, sometimes second place shapes history just as much as the first. That's going to wrap it up for us today. Thank you for sticking with us. If you've come this far, please like, share, subscribe, share it with a fellow friend, motorsports enthusiast, whatever it might be. We've got all the socials. We just appreciate the listens. We appreciate comments, interact with us any way possible. We appreciate it. We'll be back with a bunch of recaps next week. We got a whole bunch of racing this weekend. So until next time, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe. We'll see you out there.